Hey, I'm Mitch.
And I'm Greg, and this is Sidenote.
A podcast where every episode we tell stories about and then debate a controversial topic.
And then we research and splice in all the mind-blowing shiznit throughout so you are entertained while simultaneously learning.
This week, Greg and Mitch chat about the time they went vegan, and let's just say it didn't go as planned. Then, instead of a debate, Greg and Mitch are taking a deeper dive into the merits and obstacles involved in skipping meat. Side Notes today will be presented by myself, Rachel. Let's start the show.
Hi.
Hello, Mitcho.
My mind is empty right now. I've been meditating.
I was about to be like, that could be beautiful.
Yeah, I've been going to meditation class. It's at a Zen Buddhist temple. And
Okay, wow.
I feel like I've learned a lot. Yeah, no. I know it seems cheesy, but I felt like once I got there at first, I was like, you know how you have to like get past that cringiness of like doing something new that you feel uncomfortable doing?
Especially meditation, there's like a bit of a like, you know.
But there wasn't there. Like it's not like new age. It's like an older Korean woman who's like so kind and nice, and it's not actually cheesy, but I just,
as opposed to what, like a white person?
Not just a white person, but just like I feel like there's
a
lot of
point
new
to
age.
Say that.
No, because she actually has been practicing her whole life, and it's not like a new age.
And
meditation.
Buddhism is actually a very popular religion in Korea, right?
Yeah,
as opposed
so.
to maybe like other parts of the world.
For sure, and I think Zen Buddhism or Zen meditation is like a very specific style of meditation. So
I used to meditate in high school, but I would just like shut my eyes, listen to Radiohead Kid A, and put a fountain on, and I'm like, do you think that counted or no?
I think so. I think meditation can be what you want it to be, but what I've learned in this case is it is kind of just like freeing your mind of all the like thoughts and crazy things that come in. Just like, and I do believe more and more, like I read that book on flow and we talked about it on the podcast. Like when you're in that flow state, you are meditating. Like you've blocked all, like if you're painting or if I'm playing music, you stop thinking about things. You're thinking about the music. You're a little more actively involved than you would be as a meditator. But you're kind of reaching that similar state with the help of an activity.
Wow, your empty brain. So beautiful.
Beautiful.
Oh, what did we learn this week?
So this week I had a personal learning, like perhaps one of my biggest life lessons I've come to know.
Whoa.
Kind of come
this
together.
This is happening all around me and I don't even know.
Have we... I guess I keep
you had one of the biggest...
Everything's a secret for the podcast now, Greg. It has to be... You actually are second to find out.
You had one of the biggest life lessons ever?
Well, it's...
And you're telling me here on this podcast?
Yes. I think it's not like so profound, and I'm sure a lot of people... I've thought of this in my life, but I feel like I came to terms with it more recently. I've talked to you a lot about recently how in certain different podcasts and listening to sort of... I don't want to call them inspirational speakers, but people who talk about that kind of stuff.
Like who?
Realizing that, all different categories of artists, people who are in entrepreneurs and business, talking about this idea of like playing the long game, like not looking for instant gratification and things, but understanding that like good work requires a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that's what this is related to. So what I realized is that over the last maybe, I don't know, half a year, I started working with a personal trainer because I was having a lot of back issues.
He's getting jacked. That butt's getting bigger. I don't know if those undies fit anymore.
They do. It's not that much bigger, but
they're stretchy material.
That's so nice for you to say. So what I've realized with exercise, and I've like really never worked out my whole life. When I was younger, I played sports, but
whoa, jock.
Yeah, I was a really big jock when I was younger, but then I kind of fell off. Now I'm like in the gym with the bros, but I feel like I've started to realize that as you start learning a skill, you're actually not everything is available to you right away. And so I'll explain it like this. Like when I first started working out, sometimes we would be doing an exercise and they'd be saying like, think of this muscle on your back, and they'd point to something in my back. And that's what you're kind of working out in that moment. But I would be like, I literally cannot feel or control that muscle. I have no idea how to do it. But then over time, like suddenly one day after I've been doing it for a month, then I'd be like, oh my God, I literally have full control. Like there's muscles in my back now that I can think about like relaxing my shoulders when I'm at work, when I'm not exercising.
So they didn't even like
that
exist
are activated.
Before?
Yeah, in my mind, it was like the neurons weren't strong enough for me to consciously do that. Okay. But over time, I've developed it. And I feel like this is like a really good observation in life that when you start new things, you just cannot have access to all of the benefits from it or all of the skills you'll achieve from that. So like as you work out, you start to really learn about your body. You start to unlock things that you can't have at the very beginning.
So
and I feel
literally like building muscles.
building muscles, but long term, like even meditation. I feel like when I first started, I was a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I get this. It's a little bit weird. I'm not like getting a lot out of it, but I think the longer you go, you start to like get more from it because you've actually practiced more and more and you go deeper and deeper. And then I think that just applies to like all of life. Like the longer term you are involved in something, I mean, this is obvious when it comes to skills. Like the longer you practice something, the better you get. But just recently it clicked for me that the longer you do something, it literally, like your experience with it becomes so much more deep and rich. And I think it's
You
the
sound
reason
like
why.
totally fully formed right now, and I feel really insecure.
No, but
I'm like,
you
what?
probably have this skill in art, for example, or you listen to so much music, or I think about
What?
like
Listen
people,
to music? What does that mean? I'm good at
because you're-
listening to music?
Well, your ears are probably so much more attuned in a way that like a
What?
chef's taste buds like can appreciate things that I literally cannot taste.
Yours is about getting jacked, meditating, and a chef's about chefs. And right now, all you can say is that I'm good at listening to music.
No, and I said art.
I haven't done art in so long. I feel
but
so
you,
insecure
as
right
an
now.
artist who has gone through that, probably like, and I mean, we probably are. There's probably a lot of aspects of our job
I'm
at ASAP
freaking out. I
Science.
need to paint more. Oh my god.
Well, no, I'm not trying to make you feel insecure. All I mean is anyone can unlock these things, and you just have to know you have to put
And
time
put
in.
time
And sometimes at the
into it.
beginning, you're like, I don't understand why other people get out of this, but over time, you start to really appreciate. And I think, yeah, as another example, I just said a chef. Like sometimes you're like, okay, but this food tastes good, and then Gordon Ramsay's like, this literally tastes like crap, and you're like, but I like it. But he's like, has literally developed
Yeah.
tastes that we don't experience in our mouth because he spent so much time.
He's a connoisseur.
Yeah.
I guess that's what a connoisseur is,
Yeah.
right? Someone who spends
Ultimately,
a lot of
I
time
know
with
I've been
something.
rambling. I'll end it by saying, like, in my life, I'm trying to look longer term now. Not only because I'm older and I feel like everything's flying by so much faster, but it makes me feel better to know, like, hey, like 5 years is actually a short period of time. Make goals that are 10 years away because
You
like,
sound like you're on crack. I love it, but I'm just like, you sound so happy and so good. And no, in like a good way. Like, I'm so jealous of you right now. I'm like, I want what you're having. Like, I'm so envious.
okay.
Because I get what you're saying. Like, you're saying something that's like, oh my God, I just like want your energy. Like, what'd you have for breakfast? Oh, you have your new lean fit breakfast. Oh my God. You're jacked.
Well, I just,
You're
yeah, I
jacked.
feel like YouTube has put us in the mindset of everything being immediate. Every week, put out something new. You never really commit to long-term stuff. And so this has started to help me move away from that mentality of like, hey, you don't have to have something perfect come out every week. Start thinking of things that can take you years to make and aim for the year goal. Same with like exercise. People want that diet pill that fixes it right away. Just accept long-term will give you such a different appreciation.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, what I learned this week was about the warming of the oceans.
That's cool too, Greg. Like, I'm not trying to
I know, but I'm just like, I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so are we talking about mine?
Yeah.
Now, I'm like literally like
talking about
blown
you.
away. I'm like, I guess I need to do more things. I need to do more things.
That's
so I
not
can
what
become
that
an
means at all.
expert.
You, Greg, you do so many things. Think of comedy. You probably appreciate
Ew, comedy.
but that's true. You probably think about the nuance of comedy in such a way
like
that I
not
can't
really.
even
I'm just like,
appreciate.
oh, that's funny. That's I guess I do, but I'm like, I have not had this like awakening
Epiphany.
that you've had. I'm like, comedy like is literally like giving me so much stress. I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like, should I quit?
Oh. Okay, you learned about the oceans.
Yeah.
What did you learn about
like,
them?
I'm like, ew. Now I'm thinking about comedy. I'm like, comedy makes me want to barf in many ways. It's, I wish it was art. Is
tell
it
me
art?
What,
Oh
tell
God.
me what you freaking learned.
Oh my God, I'm
Greg.
having a full on like mental like
It's
midlife
like we end the
crisis.
podcast here.
Okay, yeah, this is about vegans. Oh my God. Okay, so okay. Speaking of the end of the world crises in general. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about what I learned this week in the realm of science, which is something called the blob. Okay,
Blob.
based on
The
the movie
Blob.
The Blob. Yeah, that's Celine Dion saying the claw for those of you over there who.
But like also as a reference, I thought to Liar Liar
Liar.
when Jim Carrey as the claw.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Isn't it like the other guy tries to mimic him and it's bad? Anyway.
But I think that's what Celine Dion was doing.
Right. Wow, Celine loves Liar Liar.
Celine Dion is, speaking of comedy, she's a comedic genius. Okay, so in late 2013, there was this huge patch of the Pacific Ocean that got extremely warm. It was like this 1/3 the size of America, and it got way hotter than it had to do with like the details are very specific. A lot of
Okay,
like things
like
coming
ocean
together, like
currents
El
and-
Nino, pressure, whatever. But climate change in the end was a big contributor.
Okay.
And so what happened is it killed so many phytoplankton, which then killed so many of something called copepods or like copepods. Like, I don't know, I didn't look up the pronunciation, but they're like little crustaceans that so many fish eat.
Okay.
Then all those small fish died.
Yeah.
Then the bigger fish died. And then whales died, seabirds died, and essentially they think now 100 million cod died because of this warming of the ocean.
In what period of time did they recognize
Well,
this?
they think that this year is going to be the lowest cod numbers ever. So it still has an impact because that year, all the cod that should have grown in that year had nothing to eat. So then they like died a year later. But last year, like as of last year, I think actually 2016, 100 million cod died from this blob. And the point that I want to say and that people should think about is that we think about like heat waves a lot, like on Earth, like on
land,
literally land. Sorry, I guess we're always on Earth. Water's on Earth. On land, but these are ocean heat waves, marine heat waves, and they are going to continue to happen as climate change and as we burn fossil fuels and as we move into the future. The increase in heat waves on land are going to happen, but also in the water. And the drastic impact of killing those small phytoplankton, obviously, when we learn about the food chain, it goes up, ending with whales. They think a lot of the whales died because there's an algal, like a toxic algal boost that happens when these things happen. And this year, only 99 humpback whales returned to the glacial bay in Alaska, which it was down like 45% from before, with only one calf. And they think it's still an impact of the blob. So anyways, it's one of those things that I think we think a lot about like humans and where we live and on land, but then it's like, okay, obviously.
That's so true.
We should think about
forest
heat waves.
fires. We think about stuff that is like directly impacting us. But
And here are just some stats to end on. You created a crisis for me in that you seem so good and you're like doing all these things in your life. And this is just a crisis for everyone. I'm the downer of the group. So into the year 2000, 25% of the oceans were experiencing no warming, and only 1% of the ocean had what is referred to as extreme warming. But in 2016, the results just came in, and only 5% of the oceans have no warming right now, and 12% of the oceans have extreme warming. So these blobs and the impact that we're going to see as the phytoplankton die, as the algal boosts happen, are going to be drastic. 100 million cod are dead. I'm like, how do I lift this up at the end?
You can't. No, that's important not to. We don't need to lift it up because it's just something. It's going to impact humans. Like if there's not enough cod to eat, we're going to notice.
And I just keep reading these science magazines like week after week, and it's just so much stuff about climate change. And I'm just like, I know we talk about it a lot, but I mean, it's just on my mind all the time. And I think it leads into what we're talking about today, being vegan and how do we move forward in the world. And there's lots of other like exciting things I read about. Like there's this new
advancements and
there's a really cool thing that's happening now where they're actually just like trapping CO2 from the air in these machines and then using that CO2 that they trap to then that's what they'll put in Coca-Cola to cause like fizziness. Like, because you need carbonation and CO2 does it. So, like, in order to actually make an impact, you need to, like, bottle the things that we need and, like, sell it. So they're like, is there literally a market for carbonation that we can be like, okay, Coca-Cola, you probably want to make your thing green, use CO2 from the air.
Oh, my God, that's crazy. That's kind of cool. Right. There's, like, some hope.
And when you read about it, you're like, okay, well, this is, like, an economic
Is it too little?
Too little, too now, too little, too late. JoJo didn't know, but she made a climate change anthem. It's too little, too late.
Story time.
Story time. Story time. Story time. All right, so today is all about going vegan and whether or not you should do it, whether we should do it, whether everyone should do it. We have some personal stories because we did at one point try to go vegan. And Greg, do you want to tell your story first?
Sure. So when did we go vegan? 2 years ago? Literally 2 years ago in the winter.
Yeah, I think
right?
It was
like this time 2 years ago. We decided to do it for something on ASAP Science, and we had just gotten home from a trip to Costa Rica. Beautiful trip, beautiful trip.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Really, just a biodiverse country in many ways. Just absolutely stunning. Lots of people go there for good reason. Very safe.
Yeah, we hiked. We got a bunch of ticks, which I never happened, but they promised us that they did not carry Lyme disease.
They don't. There's apparently not. Thank goodness. We were picking ticks
like
off each other
ticks on my
and
body.
eating them like
No,
fruit chimpanzees.
we did not
I
eat
was.
them.
Protein. Okay, we're talking about going vegan.
Okay.
We should be eating insects. Okay, so I start going vegan, and I'm like, wow. Okay, this is really hard. I'm extremely nauseous. I am so hungry all the time.
I remember we both kind of felt fatigued at first, right?
For about 2 days, you're high, kind of the way you felt earlier. Like
right.
On this, like, new, it's like you have like this new life epiphany. You're like, I'm vegan now.
Yeah.
You have tons of energy. You're like, actually, you're telling all your friends, you're, you know, every topic of conversation is coming out the fact that you're in fact vegan. And yeah, definitely that wears off quite quick. I remember feeling so fatigued, so sick, not coming into work. I'm not going to get into the messy details, but the toilet needed to be cleaned quite a bit more often, which was a weird situation.
Which probably I was doing.
What?
Cleaning it.
Oh my God, I thought you were having diarrhea. I was like, okay, interesting. I didn't know that you were.
Yeah, there was a point where I was like, wow, this vegan diet is really not agreeing with you. Like, I was not feeling great, but I was not like
so
dying.
I was like, I would go from starving to then like nauseous. I remember my parents making me this like delicious vegan meal because we were like going to their place for dinner, and I was like putting it in my mouth, kind of like bridesmaids with like the nut like sweating, like I'm gonna throw up. Like, why?
Like, I swear it's good.
Am I so like, and people are trying to be like, how's it going vegan? I'm like, it's actually like killing me. Like, it's just so weird. I did not expect. I'm so embarrassed. Then I started to sort of walk into rooms and people are like, Greg, are you okay? You literally look so thin. You look so sick. You look honestly like you need to stop being vegan for your own health. I'm like, I feel so awful. Like the vlogs, because we were filming it about going vegan, are just me being like, I'm could never do this.
Like I'm dying.
I go to the doctor. I'm actually really mad that I'm happy that I was proactive about this doctor's appointment because it wasn't my real doctor. It was like someone else. And there was a graph. Like I'd gone a couple times. I felt so sick of me being weighed. And then she kind of pulled up the graph on the computer and it was like a stark like decline of my weight. Like I had lost about 15 pounds in 2 weeks. And just looking at the graph, I was like, oh my God.
Something's wrong.
Something's wrong. And she was kind of like, well, you know, we could wait another 2 weeks. I was like, I don't know. Like that graph looks like
30 pounds.
Yeah. Like, and I think she was like, temp. I don't know. It was just like funny that I was like, can I like just like test this more? So she was like, yeah, okay, here. So
because what at this point you're like, what if this has nothing to do with being vegan?
Or I don't know. I was like,
you're just like, we need to figure out if something's wrong.
Yeah, I kind of was like, okay, this is when it started to click for me. I was just in Costa Rica. What's going on? Do a fecal sample. Turns out I have Giardia lamblia, a parasite from when we were in Costa Rica. Being vegan is not the reason for any of these symptoms.
No.
But
if you have these symptoms after you go vegan, like go to a doctor.
Yeah, the parasite was essentially just eating vegan food out of me. I lost so much weight. So I then got an antibiotic for my gut, killed off this like little Giardia lamblia parasite, a very popular one. It was, you know, it's the go-to parasite.
Yeah, it is. It's like classic. Everybody knows her. Everybody loves her.
Yeah, no, and we moved on. And it's actually, but so gross. It's from consuming feces. It's literally from...
But that's so weird because what we think it is from is that when we were in Costa Rica, we went on like a 3-day trek. Like it was a really long hike.
Yeah, some would say hike, but I'd say it was a trek.
It was a trek.
More of a trek than a hike.
8 hours a day is a trek. So at one point there was a little waterfall and our guide was like very rustic. Very much like, oh yeah, just the water's safe. Just like put your water bottle in the water and... you'll drink that.
But it was like so frustrating because the whole time I was being so careful, but at this point it was like the end of the trek, and it was just like it was just this perfect little thing, and he was very
confident. Likewise with the ticks, and now I'm like, do I trust that those ticks haven't given me a lifelong debilitating problem?
Oh my God, Lyme disease. Call Avril Lavigne. We would know by now. Actually, no, it can lay dormant. Anyways, but. I don't know. He was so convincing, and it was the only time I drank from a stream in a rainforest.
But I did too. We shared the same water bottles. That's why.
No, we didn't share the same water bottles, but we shared the same stream. So I think I just got a bit of poo in my stream. Or it could have been anything else. But that's just what I clock it up to because I just remember that moment of dipping my water bottle into this stream and being like, well, this is the one thing they tell you not to do, and chugging it back on the last like 100 meters of my trek. I could have just waited to get back. I'm so mad if that is the reason.
I also, I don't want to get too gross. Some people might get grossed out by this, but I'm also like laughing so hard at like how you captured a fecal sample.
What do you mean?
Like, how do you do that?
Well, it would be runoff from the feces of like the beautiful diverse biodiversity we were looking at.
No. I mean, when you had to submit a fecal sample of your own. I remember you being like, didn't you have to like store poo in our fridge?
Yeah. So, I mean, people have done that before. I know that that's quite normal.
But I mean, especially when it's diarrhea, I imagine it's harder. Well, okay.
Okay, we are not. Okay, you're literally bringing up the one thing I was like, let's not bring up.
Okay, it's
but I got. You know what you use, and they suggest, and they give you this little contraption.
I'm sorry.
But they don't use it, but they suggest a paper plate. So,
wow. Okay.
The little guy that caused Greg so much trouble, Giardia lamblia, is a flagellated parasitic microorganism. Flagellated just means a cell or organism with a whip-like appendage just whipping all around. Parasitic, meaning an organism that lives on or in another animal. Think of a tick feasting on the blood of your dog, or a frenemy who keeps leeching your emotional energy. You know, a parasite. And of course, microorganism means small, too small to see with the naked eye. So let's look at the life cycle of Giardia lamblia, the circle of life, if you will. When Greg took a swig of water from the river, it was likely contaminated by untreated sewage. Ew. And it contained Giardia in a dormant cyst phase, because only the cyst phase can survive outside the body of a host. But once they were inside Greg, they started to wake up and emerge in an active state. From there, they made their base camp in his small intestine, where they began to feast. This is why Greg lost a bunch of weight, because the Giardia are eating the nutrients that are supposed to be fueling his body. To make matters worse, they start growing their army by undergoing binary fission, which is essentially the Giardia just splitting in half and begin replicating themselves, meaning even more and more of these suckers are stealing Greg's nutrients. But still, the Giardia remain unsatisfied. They want to ruin other people's lives. They want to conquer more. So while most of them keep eating Greg's vegan meals, a troop of them return to the cyst phase, where they can make their way through the colon and be expelled through his poop. Desperate to find another host where the whole cycle can begin again.
Well, my story is actually very intertwined with that, so I asked Greg to leave out a detail of that story because we were actually doing this all for an ASAP Science video.
Yeah.
And we did end up stopping it after Greg got sick because we were like, obviously
Because these results are not... because we were trying to be like, what happens to your body when you go vegan?
And so what we were actually doing is we met up with like a medical lab team that was going to test our blood, test our physiology, all these sorts of things. We met up with a nutritionist, but we talked to them and they were like, okay, this is obviously going to skew the results. We can't test your blood after you've had a parasite, and they expected to give us like reasonable answers about going vegan.
Yeah, they were like, we can give you the results of what Giardia lamblia plus veganism causes, and it's like literally
So they were like,
weight.
for now, you have to reset, go back, eat meat, go back to your regular diet, and once things have settled,
it was actually
we'll be vegan
the
again.
worst situation because we were actually essentially measuring our weight loss from going vegan, and I managed to, right at the same time, get a parasite that caused me to lose weight.
And for me, I actually was still going through similar symptoms. I didn't have a parasite, but at the beginning it felt good, and then it felt really bad because I don't think we were eating properly.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, I'm halfway through and now I have to stop and restart this, like get back into me. And I was just kind of like, I don't know. But in my mind, that's when I think we were like, no, this time we're getting a nutritionist because it's not worth it for us to do this wrong and feel crappy. People won't be happy about that video.
Yeah.
That
Me and Rachel made a video about going vegetarian for 30 days when you were on Big Brother, locked away into a room away from society. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And
totally forgot that,
we
actually.
didn't really seek experts, and then we got roasted.
The backlash.
Yeah, because it was like, they were like, you're eating. There was this weird channel that was like, every egg is the equivalent to 10 cigarettes. I'm like, okay, that's not true. But we ate so many eggs that like a lot of people were like, that's
Where
going
do
to
people
make you feel
get that?
sick.
Every egg is equivalent to 10
I know.
cigarettes.
Radical vegans. Anyways.
Either way, so we're starting over again. It took us so long to coordinate because we had to coordinate the medical visits and the doctor, and we brought a nutritionist and
it was
whatever.
fun though.
It was really interesting. I feel like I learned so much. But what ended up happening, so this video was filmed like 2 years ago and it never came out because it took us so long to coordinate all this. We had footage that was like, we looked so different because we were younger when we had started it.
I would say a lot of logistical and almost like
we were lazy,
/ laziness.
all these
nightmares.
hurdles just made us more and more lazy.
Yeah.
And then when we finally committed to finishing it, the people at the lab had like a really big falling out. So they were no longer willing to communicate with one another. So the results it was like so much harder to communicate with them. We could only get together with one of them at a time to talk about like one set of the results, and then the other one had just kind of like gone missing, and we didn't know how to talk to them.
Science can be dramatic.
So half of our physiology results, we were like, okay, like is this video? We were like looking back at video footage, being like, did we ever say the number we weighed?
I think it's so cute that you're like blaming this like lab site because it's like, yeah, but
No,
also we got lazy.
It was totally our fault, but this was it felt like we were in the middle of drama. Like, we reached out to them and it was
didn't
very
we
much like
email both of them and it was like,
and they were like,
responded
unfortunately,
back, like, we don't speak.
Yeah, we were like, what happens in a lab? Like, that's so dramatic. That
Well, it was a private lab, so they're entrepreneurs a little bit.
Yeah, it could have just been like a business disagreement, or who knows? It's not our business. But ultimately, every now and then, I like flash back to the fact that we have like hours of footage of being vegan.
And like vlogging, like, oh, I'm downtown,
have,
I'm
like,
so hungry, don't know where to eat.
Yeah, we like traumatizing experiences of having a parasite and thinking it's because you're going vegan. And then just like, I just always am like, are we going to finish this video? It's like, you know, when you start something, I think this is called the Zeigarnik effect, like how once you start something, your brain is like compelled to finish it. So for years, it's just been sitting there and like nagging at me that we never finished this video. But I'm like, it's too, like, we literally look like babies in this video.
I
now.
know.
Like, we can't use that footage.
And I literally look sick. Like, I honestly look like a different skeleton of myself.
The only thing I'll say to end this is I remember one cool result in the blood work is that the doctor had told me I had the biggest drop in cholesterol he had ever seen. From going vegan for a month. And but also it was interesting because when we did 23andMe once, it was like red meat had the biggest impact on my weight. I don't know if they say cholesterol, but I was just like, maybe that is.
You're
like
highly impacted by the food you eat.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Ultimately, they had said 1 month really isn't enough to say that these results are because
I remember
of that.
being so competitive about the
exercise parts of it.
The exercise part.
And,
you have to like sprint and they like tell you your VO2 max. I was like sprinting to like puking exhaustion. And he was like, okay, relax. Like, yeah, you like have a good VO2 max, but like you need to chill. I wanted so bad to be considered athletic, like on camera, and then the video didn't even come out.
Hey, either way, if ever this video comes out, drag us and just be like,
oh my God, I really hope it doesn't come out. If it comes out, it means that like ASAP Science has officially run out of ideas.
You're going to be like, you're literally babies. We can tell this is over the course of 2 years, 3 or 4 years at this point.
It's amazing how a project that began several years ago can still be on Greg and Mitch's mind. Honestly, it's been on my mind too, and that is the amazing power of the Zeigarnik effect. It's what psychologists call a cognitive bias, and it works just like Mitch described. People are able to remember and recall unfinished tasks better than completed ones.
Don't you remember?
It was first discovered in 1927 by psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik after she and her professor noticed that busy waiters would remember orders that had yet to be completed, but then would forget them once the orders had been served and paid for.
Hey there, folks. My name is Dean. I'll be your waiter this evening.
After conducting her own study, Zeigarnik found that participants, after performing a task, were almost twice as likely to be able to recall the task details if they had been interrupted in the middle. This suggests that incomplete tasks create mental tension, which keeps said task in the forefront of your memory. The only way to relieve this tension is to find closure by completely finishing up what you were doing. But you can take advantage of the Zeigarnik effect. All you students out there, when you sit down to study, try taking breaks and shifting tasks every once in a while.
Give me a break. Just give me a break.
Your studies left incomplete will stick in your memory much better than if you tried studying all the way to completion. Also, if you are like me and a bit of a procrastinator, try starting the task that's in front of you.
Let's get it started in here.
If you don't get it done, your built-in Zeigarnik effect will keep on bugging you until you return and finish it. Hello there! We hope you are enjoying this episode of Sidenote, and if you are enjoying it, maybe you could do us a favor. Tell a friend about it. It actually makes a huge difference to get the word out there. Also, I remember before I started listening to podcasts, not really getting how they work, so maybe help a friend out and show them how it's done. And let us know using the hashtag Sidenote Podcast if you are vegan or vegetarian or a pescatarian, or if you're just moving into Meatless Mondays, we want to hear your stories. Okay, back to the show.
Today we have a slightly different version of our typical debate. We think we're going to call this segment Deep Dive.
I'm on the deep dive.
Okay, that'll be our jingle. We're going to write a new jingle.
Into the deep of this scientific
But like why, Greg? Why are we not
concern.
calling this a debate?
Well, because when it comes to going vegan or being vegan, we don't really have a strong, like, I don't think either of us
it's
think
not like
going
Android
vegan's
versus Apple.
bad.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is still in the style of a debate-ish. We each kind of took on one side to research and have come here with the point. So
because I think what happens is when there's we want to talk about controversial subjects, and we don't always disagree on them.
And we're not always fully educated on them either. So this is a chance for us both to kind of like, Greg's going to focus on the positive aspects of veganism. I looked into the negative aspects. We're going to each take, we're not going to time ourselves with 2 minutes, but we're each going to take our time. And then we'll have like a general deep dive discussion.
And I also think in the future too, we should be open to other different types of ways of doing this part of the podcast. That is like having people we can interview who are really smart about certain things. Maybe we should have interviewed a vegan.
Oh, true. Well, if we could plan ahead enough, maybe we
give a vegan a microphone, they won't stop talking. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. That's a stereotype.
Sure you're pro-vegan? Okay.
I am.
So you're going to start. We aren't going to time you, but Greg, why don't you run us through some of the positive aspects of going vegan?
Okay, I think the main one we can all understand is its impact on the environment. Because I think one thing that people, if you don't know, but you should know, is especially beef has a huge negligible impact on the environment.
Negligible is the opposite of what you meant.
Negative. A huge negative impact on the environment. So 70% of our fresh water is used for agriculture currently.
That you mean like 70% of the water we use?
70% of all of the fresh water that we consume. So we think about fresh water as something we put into our bodies as like the liquid water. But so much of the food that we consume has water in it. Right. Plus it takes water to like essentially
grow grains. And even feed like the cattle and chickens.
So 22,000 liters of water goes into 1 kilogram of beef.
Wow.
That's drastically high compared to almost all other fruits and vegetables.
I don't know. I'm curious how much a pool has. How many liters of water? I don't even know. I can't even picture what 22,000 liters looks like.
I know. Well, you're at home. You need 1 liter of flour for your brownies. Picture 22,000 of those of fresh water for 1 kilogram of beef.
Right.
So that's a very drastic number. Currently, the way that we eat accounts for 1/4 of all of the greenhouse gas emissions that go off. And a lot of that is coming from the industry around eating animals. And we know, like when it comes to looking at something like an apple, for example, a kilogram of apples, it's 822 liters of water, so it's much lower.
Right.
When it comes to lentils, something that a lot of vegans eat, it's actually quite similar to the amount of water that's necessary for growing 1 kilogram of chicken. So 1 kilogram of chicken has a similar amount of water needed than 1 kilogram of lentils, but 1 kilogram of lentils is a much hardier, it's going to fill you up a lot more. There's actually a lot more nutrients in that. It's like a densely packed nutrient.
I had heard something different about lentils, but I'm going to trust your stats now. I remember thinking lentils were one of the lowest. I watched a video, it was like a Vox video that was like, it's like lentils was the lowest thing on the list.
But that's because lentils are high in energy. They were probably doing it by caloric intake.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like this is about 1 kilogram of each.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think that's just one of the most important things to realize is that people who are eating vegan, they are having a much better impact on the environment. And then when we go into health, a lot of the animal products that we are eating, for especially beef, there's a really strong focus on this. If you can curb beef out of your diet or minimize beef in your diet, that's a really important thing to be thinking about because a lot of essentially type 2 diabetes, like heart disease, comes from eating animal products, specifically red meat, is a huge issue. And we've been hearing about this for a long period of time. And so I think that that's just something to remember, that it's also healthier for you to curb the amount of red meat that you are eating.
Okay.
This is a weird one that it makes you smell better.
What?
Which is just like that they found
your skin?
Yeah, like sweat samples from women and men when they ate more fruits and vegetables. They essentially gave off in studies when people smelled them, they said they smelled better, and they said that their skin looked better, which they actually think comes from like a higher input of like carotenoids. How do you say carotenoids? How would you say that?
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, what carotenoids?
Carotenoids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's the animal ethics aspect of it all, which I think is something that it's the main reason why a lot of people go vegan. There's a huge emotional
I was just moving your legs. Sorry.
Oh, you like pushed my leg. I thought you were like kind of like
if
don't
this
talk
is
about
half the table, you're like it's
I thought you were
sorry.
like don't talk about animal ethics. I was like, wait, well, that's like the main part.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So I think that this is really important because I think for me, I have a lot more of an attachment to going vegan for whatever reason, for like the environmental impact.
Same, yeah.
But this is so.
It's a big part of why a lot of people choose to go vegetarian or vegan.
And whenever I like see cows, and like now that I have a
They're
pet,
so cute.
like I've never had a dog before, and now that I have a dog, I don't know. I can't believe. I feel like I don't know. It's just really hard because what is the difference between my relationship with Ernie, our dog, and these animals that are so adorable? And pigs are smarter than dogs. And that brings me to this like point from the book that we read, Homo. You can chime in at any time too. Like I want this deep dive to be like.
No, we're gonna chat more after. You're gonna talk. You're giving your points, and then we're talking after you go through your points.
The book that we read, Homo Deus, had this really interesting point which is essentially that pigs are very intelligent. And the way that their brains work, that when they are taken from their moms in whatever process of the food industry, they know, like, the mom can understand the squealing of their pigs and all these awful things happening. And that at a point, like, human society decided that was okay because they are inferior to us. Like, we are humans, we are the superior animal, and therefore putting these animals in these situations to eat them is literally morally okay. And their argument in this book is that in the future, AI is going to take over and we are going to become inferior to them intellectually. And what is literally going to stop them from deciding to farm us, essentially, because we did that exact thing to pigs, which is sort of like a very like intellectual way of like contextualizing this, but it's kind of freaky, and it is true. What is stopping someone from doing that to us if we can do it to another animal?
When you're on top, but when it's like when suddenly you're not the top dog anymore, you're like, oh no, this is actually awful. It's really bad for us, even though we can't experience the world that you are, AI.
Exactly, which I think is a really valid argument as to why going vegan or not eating animals is.
It's like everyone who goes vegan is actually given a free pass when AI takes over. And you won't your energy won't be sucked by AI.
Yeah, maybe AI will like literally be like, what did you do in the past?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I was a vegan.
Like,
morally,
okay,
yeah.
we will let you live a natural life.
And I think
you'll be a free-range human.
A free-range human. I think that's really like an important thing to talk about. And I think also when it comes like to fishing, for example, like when we actually see about when you start to learn how they actually fish and how much waste there is in all aspects of these industries, going vegan, in my opinion, it's better for the environment. We can get into the health aspects. There's positive health aspects because in our Western society, it is obesity, it is red meat, it is heart disease that's killing us. So vegan diets are going to curb that a little bit better, like potentially if you're doing it properly. And then I think there's just like the moral aspect, which is that we are killing animals. And I don't understand how, as humans, we can continue to morally say that's okay, especially me personally as a dog owner.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't really like go into that totally in the same way as that like debate thing.
Yeah.
We're trying this out.
It's fine. No, okay.
No, I wanted to talk more openly.
I thought now I'll do the cons and then we're gonna talk openly.
Okay.
But I just not that it was gonna be a hard 2 minutes.
Okay. Whoops. Guess we should have timed me. You know I'm a talker.
Yeah, you know Greg can never get his points out in the 2 minutes anyway, so here we are.
Oh my god. Drag me. Well, I don't know. What should I do? I need it.
No, it's too late. Okay.
I never did debate club.
Okay. Doesn't matter. This is not a debate, it's a deep dive, and I'm gonna tell you some of the cons now of going vegan. So I'm gonna go through three main aspects. Number one is nutritional deficiencies. So when people go vegan, often they end up causing, issues in their own bodies. And that some people may argue that's because they're not doing it right. They're not focusing hard enough. They're just cutting things out of their diet. But that's an important thing I think to bring up is that a lot of people who do go vegan aren't necessarily planning for it in the way that would be right for their body. So there's major deficiencies, especially in something like protein, which can lead to a weakened immune system, a loss of bone and muscle density. And what they find is that the protein sources, even though there are many alternative protein sources in vegetables, they tend to be lower in quality, which means they're harder for your body to digest. They're not absorbed as well. And then even things like nuts and soy, which I love eating nuts, but in high amounts, they actually contain something called polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs. I'm like, is that homophobic?
Wow, oh my
PUFAs.
God, a PUFA. That's, what do you mean? That's a good name for a guy?
Yeah, I guess so. But those have been associated with inflammatory diseases like heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and cancer. So that's not to say that they cause those, but if you're supplementing all your protein sources with something like nuts or soy, it's worth understanding that ahead of getting in there. As a result, because of nutritional deficiencies, vegans often have to use supplements. And oftentimes vegans will become, after a few months of doing it, like much more lethargic. They might not feel good about it.
Which we did notice.
We experienced, and some people have to
when
stop
I didn't have a
vegan.
parasite, when I had
Right.
when I got rid of my parasite and was just a vegan.
But yeah, some vegans end up like being recommended by their doctor to stop, or at least reintroduce some higher sources of protein and vitamins. So that's point one. This all leads to my second point, which is tied to mental health. So a lot of these nutrient deficiencies can lead to specific mood disorders. So something like B12, which you're probably getting less of if you're a vegan.
That's mainly in beef.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, you can supplement, but oftentimes they say like supplements, even like vitamin D, you can only really get it from the sun, even though you can take a supplement. It doesn't
you can
help
get
in the
vitamin
same way.
B12 from some vegan foods, but
Yeah.
it's just like predominantly we get
Yeah,
it
if you're eating beef regularly, it's much easier. And so that's associated with the neurotransmitter serotonin, which ultimately affects
We
the
love.
mood. Yeah,
Ooh,
we love
yeah.
it, makes us feel good. So if you don't have it, it can impact mood disorders. Things like folate deficiencies, which studies have found some vegans are up to 25%. Have 25% less folate in their bodies than like the average healthy human, can lead to depressive symptoms. Amino acid deficiencies are a problem with mood
because
disorders
you get
as
amino
well.
acids from protein.
Exactly. And then omega-3 fatty acids help maintain your cell membrane health, which can affect learning and memory deficits. So ultimately, if you're not highly aware of the different nutrients, once you go vegan, you have to be really aware of these things if you're going to commit to it. Then finally, we'll talk about the environmental issues. So no argument that going vegan has a really net positive impact on the environment. I think that's why a lot of people do it. But as a result of this trendy market growing, it's actually having a pretty
Specific
major
impact.
Yeah. I wouldn't say worldwide, but two examples are things like avocados and quinoas have become incredibly popular over the last however many years that the trend of being a vegetarian and veganism has picked up. And as a result, a lot of countries who are making these products now cannot even domestically afford them. So places like a kilogram of avocados, the equivalent pricing in Mexico is that of a daily wage for a Mexican worker. Places like Kenya have stopped the exports of avocados because it's just too much, and Australia is also rationing it as well. So it's putting these new trends
strain on a new
strains.
because
I know I mentioned Australia, but often these strains like are impacting countries that are already being taken advantage of because they have the perfect climates for all these fruits and vegetables that we love. They're exotic, they're exciting. In the winter, we can't have them, and so it's nice for us to get them in. But yeah,
but that's an important thing to realize. It's like, of course, if the world were decided to go fully vegan right now, there's going to be strains on obviously parts of the way that
any
the food
industry
is made.
that has to.
But when you think about how much deforestation is happening in the Amazon to grow cattle there, how even places like East Asia, which are now starting to eat a lot more red meat, that red meat has to come from somewhere. When we were in Japan, a lot of the red meat we were eating was coming from North America, being shipped there.
Right.
The beef that they would eat locally was called Kobe beef. It's really expensive. A small island, they can't produce the beef. The beef's made in America, made in South America, and that is just such a strain on the environment. And I mean, we talked about it earlier in this episode when it comes to the warming, the heat waves of the ocean, like we are in a climate change disaster currently, and the way that we eat needs to change. But you're right, we can't just expect that it's all good if you go vegan. Things like avocados and quinoa.
And just being aware, I think it's important that there's not the sort of like holier than thou. Personally, I respect vegans, and I'm like, wow, I wasn't able to keep it up. I think it's an amazing journey and like self-control and consciousness that like they're thinking about these things. But I do think there's still those aspects of being aware. Like it doesn't mean you're worse because suddenly you're putting all this pressure on another industry, but just knowing that it's not like how do we mitigate those risks as well?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, which I do think it bothers me when people make fun of vegans or use.
It's like the butt of the joke.
Yeah, there's
And
so many. It's actually like talking about vegans is so controversial.
It's
Like
so weird
because
it is. But I think I was in that place like maybe 5-10 years ago. Would have made those jokes like, oh, they're vegan, but now it's like, wait, why? Why are we making fun of that?
Well, there's a socioeconomic issue, I think, is why sometimes it feels like you're punching up when you make fun of vegans because it's sort of like that first world problems thing. Like in order to have the economic ability to choose how you're going, even us, we are in a very, like, we are so wealthy when it comes to the fact that we have a successful YouTube channel that even we found it hard to be vegan because of the fact that you needed to have a little bit more time into it.
And money.
You needed to have the money. There were times where we were like, we're spending so much money on
why
this.
would I spend that much money on
the option for me at this restaurant is so much more
expensive
expensive than the meat
classic
option,
meat
for
option,
example. And I think that is why people think they can easily make fun of vegans. I also think it's like a vulnerability thing. They feel attacked.
Like they're the bad ones, so you like throw it back at somebody
else.
And
when people make fun of how vegans have to talk about it all the time, being vegan made me really empathize with that because it's a discussion. You always are talking about how you're going to hang out with friends at a restaurant, for example. Like, you need to bring up that this is your lifestyle and diet choice all the time because it actually factors into so much more of your life than you realize. And it's embarrassing. And maybe you have vegan friends who are not maybe approaching it with and making you feel bad about it. But if they're just talking about it a lot, it might be because it's a huge impact.
And it's a huge part of their life.
And it does remind you that
you can't have a snack without being aware of where it came from, what's in it, what the ingredients are. And that might seem pretentious when someone's like, oh, pass me the chip bag so I can read every ingredient. But when we were doing the vegan test, it's like we actually did that. And as a result, everyone around us knew we were doing vegan.
Yeah.
And it was like we were always talking about it.
And if you're, I think we're getting towards what I think our end of this is going to be, which is about a balance, which sometimes the hardest part about being vegan was saying no to something that's actually quite good for the environment, that doesn't have any animal products in it, but has like a bit of gelatin, for example. Or like when you're really becoming so strict that it's causing you to stop eating something convenient, that's when it gets really challenging.
Yeah. I want to add one last point, and you also just made me think of another thing. So 2 things. One, looking between diets, like the environmental impact, vegan diet is relatively similar. It's better, but not by a lot, as being a vegetarian, which is also just a little bit better than the Mediterranean diet in terms of environmental impact, versus like meat eating completely is like a huge impact on
what
the
do you mean
environment.
meat eating completely?
So like people not like only eating meat, but
like a Western diet.
In studies, a Western diet.
Like
in studies,
potatoes.
they've said like the Mediterranean diet actually is not that far off of the environmental impact that vegan diet or vegetarian diet has. So for me, I think an important thing to remember, and we talk about this a lot, is like maybe we shouldn't always be harping on people to stop eating meat, but we can focus on like, hey, reducing the amounts of meats you eat, thinking consciously about the kinds of meat you're buying, how often every week you're having them is maybe a more important discussion to have, because it's really hard for people. It's like so culturally ingrained to have meat in people's diets that if you just say like, no, you need to literally cut it out of every meal, people don't even know where to start. What do you cook, you know?
It might be the way that we have this like seep into culture a little bit more easily than it's almost like cutting anything cold turkey. Like how do turkey, don't eat turkey. But how do you allow this to become progressively better in a more easy way? Because even we are environmentally conscious people who are not vegan, but have made a decision since being vegan. It was a great thing to try. It helps you become really conscious of what you're eating. I know that we eat, ever since that experience, way less meat.
Yeah, we almost never cook meat at home. I say we cook fish at home pretty regularly,
which is still has a huge
maybe
impact on the
every now and then chicken, but I don't think we've cooked beef ever in the last 2 years at least. Just the one other thing I wanted to bring up that has always kind of gotten to me is that vegans won't eat honey. And I know because I love honey so much. And my argument was always like, well, first of all, the bees are like, they're free to go wherever.
All plants,
also, exactly. Bees, those same bees are being used to fertilize probably like 70 to 80% of the vegetables you have in the grocery store. So if you're not willing to have honey, you maybe should also be considering all those plants those bees are pollinating, which is like basically all the food we're eating. Yeah. So it is kind of like a weird, it's arbitrary in some cases.
Yes.
I think for me, vegetarianism was much easier to understand because on the surface you can know immediately, is that vegetarian or not? Whereas vegan, you really have to look at every label, which I think is a huge barrier for a lot of people. And knowing that the environmental impact is not that much different, although I know some people
But the
care more
dairy
about-
industry is, if you're thinking about animal cruelty and you're thinking about even the environmental impact, the dairy industry is, you know what I mean?
Like,
if you're looking at it
massive,
from that,
it's insane. Yeah.
So I think it's obviously so complicated. It's why it's like a hard discussion to have.
Your milk carton usually depicts a black and white cow frolicking in open fields in a quaint farm. But in most cases, that's just not how it works. For starters, the world eats a lot of dairy. In America, economists crunched the numbers collected by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and found that in a single year, the average American consumed 630 pounds of milk, yogurt, and cheese.
What?
To meet those insane production demands, most milk in the U.S. comes from mega dairies. Some with as many as 15,000 cows, and these dairy cows are subjected to continual impregnation. Similar to humans, and if you are like me and you have breasts, we're not making milk 24/7. It's only after we had a baby that we start lactating. So dairy cows are the same, and because of this, they are continually artificially impregnated, give birth, and then they have their calves separated from them within the first 24 hours. Most of these calves are usually killed a week later. The continual pregnancies and separation, coupled with other animal welfare problems, means dairy cows only live about 6 to 7 years, whereas generally cows live 20 to 25 years. On top of this, dairy contributes to similar environmental issues as beef cattle. In Australia, for example, livestock farming accounts for 10 to 16% of greenhouse gas emissions, with dairy farms contributing 19% of that. Also, these high concentrations of cows means a lot of manure, which often runs off into the watershed, polluting the groundwater with nitrogen, which can lead to increases in toxic algal blooms. According to the EPA, a 2,000 cow dairy generates more than 240,000 pounds of manure daily, or nearly 90 million pounds a year of shit. The USDA estimates that the manure from 200 milking cows produces as much nitrogen as sewage from a 5,000 to 10,000 person community. All this to say that dairy has some serious ethic problems, as well as environmental ones.
One thing I'd say about that honey thing is that I find sometimes I see people, it is a great point towards vegans, but the way that I think about, even there are radical vegans, they literally attacked us for our vegetarian video. I've seen them out there, but they kind of, when I think about the world, I'm like, I don't need to go after and make fun of radical vegans, because I'm like, they're at least
they're trying to do
vegan.
something significant.
And there's something about getting comfy and making fun of them and like going back to our really heavy meat eating diets that I'm like, no, that is actually the issue.
Yeah, I agree.
We eat way too much meat. We don't need to be eating this much meat.
Mm-hmm.
We live in an industry where agriculture has really become an issue that I think it is something that we could curb. That I think that honey thing is interesting and it's like kind of funny and it's true.
No, I know. It's mostly just because I love honey. But I agree. At the end of the day,
if you're going vegan, I respect you.
Yeah, a vegan's not the person that
Regardless.
I want to gear my negative energy towards. Like, why not the freaking oil companies? You know what I mean? It's like, am I really going to spend all this energy to attack someone who's trying to do something positive for the envegans, for animals?
And even if they're talking about it a lot,
humans.
I just like will always have like props to vegans that I just like.
And I think it's overplayed. It's more like people talk about vegans talking about it a lot more than they actually talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
It's become one of those tropes that you're like, okay, like this joke is kind of old now.
Yeah.
Because they don't.
Yeah.
Like there's many vegans who just like live their lives and eat their food and don't try and rub it in people's faces. So
I guess to speak from a personal place, all we can say. Maybe we can do another episode where we actually have like people who are vegan
Yeah,
on,
or like
where
experts who can come in and talk about
go
it
into
with us.
more of a deep dive. Like, this could be maybe our first vegan episode. But I think what we have learned to do is to try and eat less meat, to be conscious of what we are eating. We still do eat beef, but we won't, like, I honestly
It's primarily
get
for
gross. After watching Okja, like, watch Okja on Netflix, like that, like, it's like, I watched Okja while we were vegan. I was like, thank goodness, because it was like a very emotional movie. But I honestly just can't buy raw beef or pork anymore. Like, it just looks... It makes, you know what I mean? It's an emotional reaction that I have to it now. Like, it reminds me of like blood and like.
Yeah, for me, I don't really have an attachment to the cuteness because I'm like, when I was traveling the world, came across, certain cultures that would eat dog, and that didn't bother me because I was like, why should I value my dogs, the ones that I've had in my life, but I can't judge another culture because food is food and I eat all sorts of meat.
Yeah.
So for me, that's never been a compelling argument. But to me, once I started learning about the environmental impact, it's when I was like, yeah, you know what? I think this might be a thing in the future. Kind of like we look back at people smoking, we're like, how to do it, or we look back and see really cultural movements that were like negative in the past that we judge. I do think in the future people might look back and be like, why didn't people care enough to change?
What do you think would be the main thing? Like fast food industry, maybe? When you think about health and environmental impact, that's something that could be.
I don't know where that anger will be pointed towards. I think it'll just be like looking at, there's many smart people. I think in 100 years they might go like, why were the smart people like who knew about this not changing? Like, I don't know why.
Such a bigger argument. Yeah, that's such
it
a
might
bigger,
not, but
yeah.
I just have this feeling like they'll look back and be like, wow, like we've created a world now where like it's fully sustainable. We're not having like crazy negative impact. Maybe at that point they can't.
You're such an optimist.
I don't know.
love that you're so optimistic. It's so funny. I'm like, in 100
like the
years,
world's going to be dead.
Yeah, no, I totally disagree. I think there's so many other factors. I don't know what they are. Like, it's so easy to blame capitalism for everything. I think that's like the go-to right now, especially that I don't know what the other options are, but yeah, it's like when I think about 100 years from now, I hope that we look back and think, well, we curbed that agricultural issue.
I think when the fish run out and when we can't support the population anymore.
Fish.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know. I think the ideal endpoint for all of these initiatives, even like, it's like we got to get to the point where we can make meat sustainably in a way that is actually not harmful to the environment and is respectful of animals, living creatures, and things like that. But I think we might get there one day.
Yeah.
And mix that with like reduced consumption. But I don't know. I don't know.
It's so hard. That's why this is a very tough thing to talk about. And it's why I actually want to do more. I want to do more episodes of being vegan and get some other perspectives in here because I think we could talk about this endlessly. And I think that a lot of people have very strong opinions on this because it's about the food we put into our bodies, which is a big part of all of our days. I'm always thinking about my next meal. That's why I'm alive.
That's all I think about.
The only thing about snoozing and treats and
Okay,
treats
well,
and snoozing.
I want to know what everyone else thinks. How many of you out there are vegans? How many of you out there feel some unexplainable negative emotions toward vegans? If so, why? Let's talk about it. Hashtag Sidenote Podcast. Let us know what you think if you've ever tried to go vegan or if you are, or vegetarian or anything like that. You can also tweet us at Mitchell Moffat and at WhaleWatchMePLZ. And yeah, I don't know. What else, Greg?
Oh my gosh.
You're just like staring at me.
Oh no, I know. I'm just gazing into your eyes. I also realize that we're filming these for the podcast.
Yeah, I look at the camera. Greg just stares at me.
Okay,
the whole
Mitch
time.
is such a good YouTuber and he's good at vlogging, as we know, and he's looking at the camera. I'm literally just looking at him longingly, and I'm like, he hasn't looked me in the eyes this whole time.
I'm like,
why?
There's other people in the room, Gregory, and they're in the
Oh
camera.
my gosh.
And the
One day I
microphone.
will figure this world out.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Mushroom.
Bye. Yeah.